Agitorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
We vegetate.
Okay, we're looking at which encyclical now? On Freemasonry? Written by... And he warns, one of the big warnings to the bishops is to do what? Tear off the mask. That really applied a couple years ago with all this mask craze, with the lies going around with the whole COVID fantasy. A biological weapon, that's what it was, on the people to test. Anyway, so he says, tear the mask off the Freemasons. Show them for what they are, who intend to destroy the Catholic Church. And maybe not the lower guys, they're just the puppets and the do-gooders, such as Rotary Club with their spaghetti dinners, Odd Fellows with their do-good actions, and Shriners who have hospitals. And you know how the Protestants always attack the Catholic Church for having statues? The Shriners have, in most of their hospitals in front, they have a gigantic statue of a Shriner, a man with his silly hat on holding a child in his arms. So, no problem with statues with that, is there? So, Pope Leo XIII says, tear the mask off. Show the rats for what they are. Lift up the rocks. And when you lift the rocks, you see all these centipedes, beetles, worms, bugs that all scatter because they don't like the light, right? So this is what Pope Leo XIII is saying. Tear the mask off. We'll get there yet. Okay, we left off on paragraph 7. Pick it up, Guadalupe.
But what is of highest importance, the course of events has demonstrated the prudence of our predecessors, for their provident and paternal solicitude had not always and everywhere the result desired, and this, either because of this simulation and cunning of some who were active agents in the mischief, or else of the thoughtless levity of the rest who ought, in their own interest, to have given to the matter their diligent attention. In consequence, the sect of Freemasons grew with a rapidity beyond conception in the course of a century and a half, until it came to be able, by means of fraud and audacity, to gain such entrance into every rank of the state as to seem to be almost its ruling power.
Yes, so we left off here last class with Freemasonry, especially in the 1700s, becoming very fashionable. It was the cool thing to do, was to be a Freemason. So even Mozart joined. Mozart wrote a whole piece, Figaro, full of Masonic symbolism. Doesn't mean his music is bad, it's just he made a huge mistake. And I think he pulled out of that before he died. I think he converted before he died back out of the Freemasonry. I could be corrected. All right, go on.
This swift and formidable advance has brought upon the Church, upon the power of princes, upon the public well-being, precisely that grievous harm which our predecessors had long before foreseen. Such a condition has been reached that henceforth there will be grave reason to fear, not indeed for the Church, for her foundation is much too firm to be overturned by the effort of men, but for those states in which prevails the power, either of the sect of which we are speaking, or of other sects not dissimilar, which lend themselves to it, as disciples and subordinates.
Yeah, so you got the big Freemasons that are Masons, and then you got their little puppets. That's what he's saying here. But they all work to subvert the Catholic states. And even the Protestant states, they want to overthrow. Protestant states would condemn abortion, right? So they want to even overthrow that. So we had a good taste of the face of liberals in the past 4 years. How they're just totally given to anarchy and evil. It's communism. 8, Gavril.
For these reasons, we no sooner came to the helm of the Church than We clearly saw and felt it to be our duty to use our authority to the very utmost against so vast an evil. We have several times already, as occasion attacked certain chief points of teaching which showed in a special manner the perverse influence of Masonic opinions. Thus, in our encyclical letter, Quod
Apostolici Muneris,
we endeavored to refute the monstrous doctrines of the socialists and communists. Afterwards, in another beginning arcanum, we took pains to defend and explain the true and genuine idea of domestic life, of which marriage is the spring and origin. And again, in that which begins
Diuturnum illud,
we ascribe the ideal of political government conform to the principles of Christian wisdom, which is marvelously in harmony, on the one hand with the natural order of things, and on the other with the well-being of both sovereign princes and of nations.
Okay, so this is Pope Leo XIII. He's saying we now have to use our authority to expose the Freemasonic conspiracies, this wicked movement. We have to speak about it. And then he said in the past, and Pope Leo XIII, he wrote great encyclicals, just pristine, dogmatically clear, doctrinally just magnificent. So he says, we wrote Quod Apostolici Muneris, which condemns socialism and communism, Arcanum, which defends marriage and the family against the attacks of communism and socialism. For example, one of the goals of Freemasonry and communism is get the woman out of the house. Get her to stop having children, get her to stop loving the things of the home, turn her into this masculine career woman. And they've done it. They've destroyed the woman and therefore destroyed the family. And it's a tragedy. And the bishops were supposed to preach all this. The bishops were supposed to preach what the popes were ordering them to preach. Women, don't go with the trends. Don't follow the spirit of the world. Don't dress like men. Don't wear pants. Don't wear miniskirts. Don't dress immodest. And it was the popes who were shouting this. But when the bishops failed to do this, reinforce the papal teaching, and especially the priests at the ground level, parish level, they'll have to answer for that negligence. And then Diuturnum illud talks about the relation of church and state and what a Catholic government is supposed to do. So, all excellent. These really are good, and we will look at these encyclicals in the future. All very powerful. And thanks to Archbishop Lefebvre, they're not being buried and forgotten. It was thanks to Archbishop Lefebvre that all of us priests of the Society of St. Pius X have rediscovered the papal teachings, which are part of the ordinary magisterium, and as long as they're in line with all of Catholic tradition, they share in infallibility. They share in the inerrancy of doctrine. But when you get to the encyclicals of John the 23rd and Pope Paul VI and all these modernist popes, they don't match up with tradition. They contradict tradition, so they all stand condemned by Catholic tradition. So that's the beauty of our Catholic faith is, a pope can come around and start promoting, married people can get divorced and go to communion living in with their new partners, as Pope Francis did. It's a heresy, really, a moral heresy. So all of Catholic tradition condemns his encyclicals. So we can peacefully say, Holy Father, you're wrong, tradition condemns you, we're not obeying your nonsense. And that's what Archbishop Lefebvre had basically to say to Paul VI. I'm not obeying your new religion. I'm not accepting your fabricated Protestant Mass. No way. Oh, you're being disobedient. You're a rebel. You're divisive. You're a renegade. All right. If I am a renegade and disobedient, it's to modernism and liberalism, but not to Catholic tradition. So, Pope Leo XIII, yeah, he wrote some powerful stuff. So he's saying here, now I have to use my papal authority to expose this conspiracy. So that's a proper use of his papal authority, unlike these modernist popes who use it to crush tradition. All right, read on.
It is now our intention, following the example of our predecessors, directly to treat of the Masonic Society itself, of its whole teaching, of its aims, and of its manner of thinking and acting, in order to bring more and more into the light of its power for evil, and to do what we can to arrest the contagion of this fatal plague.
Yeah, to arrest it, to stop it, this fatal contagion and plague. So now we're going to lift the hood now and go into the engine. He's going into the mechanics of Freemasonry. 9, Guadalupe.
There are several organized bodies which, though differing in name and ceremonial, in form and origin, are nevertheless so bound together by community of purpose and by the similarity of their main opinions, as to make in fact one thing with the sect of the Freemasons, which is a kind of center whence they all go forth, and whither they all return. Now, these no longer show a desire to remain concealed, for they hold their meetings in the daylight and before the public eye, and publish their own newspaper organs. And yet, when thoroughly understood, they are found still to retain the nature and habits of secret societies. There are many things like mysteries from it which is the fixed rule to hide with extreme care, not only from strangers, but from very many members also, such as their secret and final designs, the names of the chief leaders, and certain secret and inner meanings, as well as their decisions and the ways and means of carrying them out.
Stop. Notice what stands out in all their workings that the Pope is saying in this paragraph. What stands out to you that what they're up to?
It's all secret.
Secrecy. Secrecy. That's why the Catholic resistance reels against the secrecy of the fake resistance. It's very suspicious, this whole fake resistance secrecy. Where's Mass? We don't know. Who's saying the Mass? I don't know. Where's the funeral? I don't know. What's the address? No one can know unless you're in the inner circle. It's absolute madness. But it mimics Freemasonry, and that's why it doesn't smell good. That's all I can say. It doesn't smell right. Doesn't, if it looks like a Mason, talks like a Mason, walks like a Mason, probably is. Probably is. So this is the Pope himself saying this. Their mark is secrecy, so that even the lower members don't know the secret vows and oaths of the higher members. And the middle members don't know the knowledge and secrets of the highest members. So it's all built on secrecy and strange ceremonies. You can go to Arlington Masonic Lodge down in Arlington, Virginia, not far from Washington, D.C., and you will see the huge statue of George Washington with the Masonic apron. And on the walls they have quotes of his letters to his fellow brethren, the Freemasons. And you can see the setup of a Masonic temple there, how it was when George Washington was there. So they keep it like a museum. And when you look at it, it looks like the setup of a new Mass. There's the chair facing the people, and then the table, and on the side the podium with the Bible. Right? So, now, George Washington, was he one of these bloodthirsty, child-sacrificing Freemasons? I don't think so. He was a decent man and soldier. but he was a Mason. Was he one of the higher ups? Probably not the bloodthirsty ones, but he was certainly one of the knowledgeable ones. He certainly didn't want Jesus Christ as king of the United States. No way. We had enough of kings. And he was friends with the Freemasons who cut off the king in France. They were all buddies. Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, George Washington, they were all friends with these Masons in France. That's why the French Masons, Robespierre, Diderot, and all these crooks who did chop off the head of the king, and later the queen, they gave to George Washington as a gift the key to the Bastille, the storming of the Bastille, which was anarchy of the Freemasons in France. So they were buddies. And then the Statue of Liberty, the Goddess of Liberty in the harbor, that was a gift from French Masons to the American Masons. So there it is. We have the Goddess of Liberty in the harbor. However, I always say the Statue of Liberty could easily be, with some fine engineering, transformed to the Blessed Virgin Mary, with a crown on her head and the child Jesus in her arms. And then there you have the real mother of the true liberty. So maybe someday they'll do a facelift. All right, finish that last paragraph. There is no doubt. This is no doubt.
This is no doubt the object of the manifold difference among the members as to right, office, and privilege of the received distinction of orders and grades, and of that severe discipline which is maintained.
Gavril, candidates.
Candidates are generally commanded to promise, nay, with a special oath, to swear that they will never to any person at any time or any way make known the members, the passes, or the subjects discussed. Thus with a fraudulent external appearance, with a style of simulation which is always the same. The Freemasons, like the Manichees of old, strive as far as possible to conceal themselves and to admit no witnesses but their own members.
What are they up to again?
Secrecy.
Secrecy. Conceal themselves. Don't announce the Mass. Don't announce publicly the place for Mass. Don't use the internet to reach souls. Everything's in secret. Everything's hidden. And that's not how our Lord works. And so the Pope here is exposing the Masons, and they love to work in the dark. And they also, Bishop Williamson used to tell us years ago in the seminary that the saying, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye, these children verses are little spin-offs of Masonic ceremonies. And Bishop Williamson he told us of some Freemason in England and London that revealed some of their secrets. And he was found hanging off the bridge, cut from ear to ear. So the Masons often leave their mark on their murders. So let people know this is a Masonic murder. And nobody knows who did it. It's done in the night. So any members of theirs who break the secrets, they suffer or get killed for it or die mysterious deaths, which today is very easy now. All right, go on. As a convenient manner of concealment.
As a convenient manner of concealment, they assume the character of literary men and scholars associated for purposes of learning. They speak of their zeal for a more cultured refinement and their love for the poor, and they declare their one wish to be the amelioration of the condition of the masses.
Yeah, they want to improve the condition of the masses. They want to help the poor, the hospital, like Shriners hospitals, right? Zeal for culture, education, public school education is definitely Masonic. definitely Masonic. Government schools is definitely Masonic. And the U.S. has been soaked in this for decades. 200 years of public school garbage. It's a wonder there's still decent people left. But Freemasons don't want, they don't want mass anarchy and bloodshed. They like the decent, well-dressed, Obama in a suit and tie. That's how Masons are. They want Obama not in, cut up blue jeans and ripped up colorful t-shirts and purple hair. They don't want that yet. They want Obama dressed in a suit. That's what they want. So it looks good. It looks mannered, polite, social etiquette. And this is how improve literature, refinement, culture. This is their buzzwords. So that's why they get into the Super Bowl halftime. A lot of these shows now are, if not diabolic, they're certainly full of Masonic symbolism. And some of these black rappers, you wouldn't expect blacks to be Freemasons, but a lot of them are. The ones that make a lot of money and are high up in rap and and some of them admit they sold their soul to the devil. They don't hide it. All right, go on. Moreover, where were we? Were these purposes?
Were these purposes aimed at in real truth? They are by no means the whole of their object. Moreover, to be enrolled, it is necessary that the candidates promise and undertake to be thenceforward strictly obedient to their leaders and masters, with the utmost submission and fidelity, and to be in readiness to do their bidding upon the slightest expression of their will, or if disobedient, to submit to the direst penalties and death itself. As a fact, if any are judged to have betrayed the doings of the sect, or to have insisted commands
resisted
commands given, punishment is inflicted on them not infrequently and with so much audacity and dexterity that the assassin very often escapes the detection and penalty of his crime.
So here's the Pope saying they do their own murders. If they disobey the lodge, they're so successfully murdered that they don't even detect who did it. Or the police who are involved, or the lawyers, they're all paid off. And there's a lot of this that goes on, definitely. 10, but to simulate and wish to lie hid, to bind men like slaves in the very tightest bonds, and without giving any sufficient reason, to make use of men enslaved to the will of another for any arbitrary act, to arm men's right hands for bloodshed after securing impunity from the crime. All this is an enormity from which nature recoils. So the Pope is here saying it's against the natural law to bind men to secrecy, to do murders for stupid things, like breaking the secret of the lodge. And he says this is evil and it's against nature. Wherefore reason and truth itself make it plain that the society of which we are speaking is in antagonism with justice and natural uprightness. In other words, it's totally against justice and natural decency. And this becomes still plainer or more obvious inasmuch as other arguments also, and those very manifest, prove that it is essentially opposed to natural virtue. For no matter how great may be men's cleverness in concealing and their experience in lying, it is impossible to prevent the effects of any cause from showing, in some way, the intrinsic nature of the cause whence they come. So in other words, the devil always shows his tail. You'll always catch his tail or his hoofs. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor a bad tree produce good fruit. Now, the Masonic sect produces fruits that are pernicious and of the bitterest savor, the bitterest flavor. For from what we have above most clearly shown, that which is their ultimate purpose forces itself into view. Namely, what is their ultimate goal? What's their purpose? The utter overthrow of
that whole
religious and political order of the world, which the Christian teaching has produced.
Yes, they do not want the social kingship of Jesus Christ. They have overthrown it with World War I, which got rid of the monarchies, and then World War II, which spread all over the world the fake democracy. And now they got Vatican II, the overthrow of Christ's kingship. This is not what they want. They don't want Christ as king. They don't want the political order of Christendom. This has been their goal, right? To overthrow Christendom. So that's why, they'll grant the Latin Mass. They'll give you permission to have your Latin Mass, your flavor of devotion that you want, but don't fight for the kingship of Christ. Don't you dare oppose Vatican II on document on religious liberty, which is totally Masonic. Dignitatis Humanae is absolute Masonic through and through. That's why Archbishop Lefebvre said when Cardinal Bea visited New York City, he went to the B'nai B'rith, the very high Masonic lodge, B'nai B'rith, and asked them, what do you want from the council? They said, give us
religious liberty.
Give us religious liberty. Freedom of all religions. Which means, basically, there is no religion. And they did. They got it. The Freemasons had a victory with Vatican II. So that's why they don't like Archbishop Lefebvre. They don't mind Bishop Schneider because he doesn't attack the Vatican II so much and show its evil face as it really is. They don't mind that. He fights for his Latin Mass. That's nice. But don't you dare step into the ring with the big heavyweights of the political questions, that Christ must reign as king. That's what they don't want. So, namely, what is their goal? The utter overthrow of that whole religious and political order of the world which the Christian teaching has produced, and the substitution of a new state of things in accordance with their ideas, of which the foundations and laws shall be drawn from mere naturalism. So in other words, the overthrow of Catholic society, the overthrow of Christendom, the overthrow of all the influence of Christianity, the true Christianity, and replace it with the New World Order. And of course, their ultimate goal is to prepare for the coming Messiah of the Jews, which will be the
Antichrist.
11. Who's up next?
What we have said and are about to say must be understood of the sect of the Freemasons taken generically, and insofar as it comprises the associations kindred to it and confederated with it, but not with the individual members of them. There may be persons amongst these, and not a few, who, although not free from the guilt of having entangled themselves in such associations, yet are either themselves partners, are neither themselves partners in their criminal acts, nor aware of the ultimate object which they are endeavoring to attain.
All right, so in other words, we have a lot of useful idiots in the Freemasons, but they're very important, the useful idiots, because they're smiley, they're friendly, they make Freemasonic lodges look good, they're all do-gooders, they all mean well, they're all smiley. Oh, you believe that religion? How nice. You believe that religion? How nice. We're open to all religions. This is the perfect, useful idiot for Freemasons, and they're loaded with them. But the higher-ups are as Pope Leo XIII says, they're the ones partners in the criminal acts. Right? In the same way, go on.
In the same way, some of the affiliated societies, perhaps, by no means approve of the extreme conclusions which they would, if consistent, embrace as necessarily following from their common principles, did not their very foulness strike them with horror. Some of these, again, are led by circumstances of time and places, either to aim at smaller things than the others usually attempt, or they themselves would wish to attempt. They are not, however, for this reason, to be reckoned as alien to the Masonic Federation. For the Masonic Federation is to be judged not so much by the things which it has done, or brought to completion, as by the sum of its pronounced opinions.
Yes, so the Pope here is saying, not every Mason is, a bloodthirsty pro-abortion. Again, the useful idiots. 12, Gabriel.
Now the fundamental doctrine of the Naturalists, which they sufficiently make known by their very name, is that human nature and human reason ought in all things to be mistress and guide. Laying this down, they care little for duties to God, or pervert them by erroneous and vague opinions, for they deny that anything has been taught by God. They allow no dogma of religion or truth, which cannot be understood by the human intelligence, nor any teacher who ought to be believed by reason is of his authority. And since it is a special and exclusive duty of the Catholic Church fully to set forth in words truths divinely received, to teach, besides other divine helps to salvation, the authority of its office, and to defend the same with perfect purity, it is against the Church that the rage and attack of the enemies are principally directed.
Yes, they hate the Catholic Church of tradition. They love the Church of Vatican II. They love Vatican II. They love Pope Francis. They love John Paul II. They love Assisi meetings. That's all down their alley. But that's not our Catholic Church. So it is logical, gentlemen, that it's going to come to blood. The union of the conciliar church with the state, the modern New World Order political powers, it's very likely they're going to join forces and persecute Catholic tradition. And they already are in so many ways. So they're naturalists. They don't believe anything above reason and human nature. So what would they say about the Most Holy Trinity and the Incarnation and the sacrament of the altar?
They would say they don't have to, they can't comprehend it with their own reason, and so they don't have to believe it.
Right. But if you want to believe it, and that's your pious thoughts, that's fine with them. As long as you don't seriously implement the kingship of Christ. This is the one thing they cannot stomach. If there's a serious movement to reestablish Catholic governments, to establish the reign of Christ the King, then they go to war. And they're serious about it. They will not let this man reign over us again, Christ the King. So they're pretty slippery, and they worship the devil up on the very top. I guess one holy nun wrote that at the highest seat of the Masonic lodges, at the very, very, very highest meetings, it's Lucifer on the head chair. Lucifer himself. 13. In those matters which regard religion, let it be seen how the sect of the Freemasons acts, especially where it is more free to act without restraint, such as in the Western nations. And then let anyone judge whether in fact it does not wish to carry out the policy of the naturalists. By a long and persevering labor, they endeavor to bring about the result, namely, that the office and authority of the church may become of no account in the
Civil state.
Yeah. And for this same reason, they declare to the people and contend that church and
State.
ought to be.
All together.
Disunited.
So who promotes separation of church and state?
The Freemasons.
Who has conceived the idea of separation of church and state?
The Freemasons.
Who promotes the separation of church and state?
The Freemasons.
Who treats separation of church and state as the cornerstone of belief in the modern liberal governments?
Freemasons.
Who has built the modern liberal governments?
Freemasons.
And built it on what? Separation of?
Church and state.
Yes. And liberal Catholics believe this. They really believe in separation of church and state. If you and I believe this, we are heretics. We incur condemnation from the church. And will answer to God for it. Especially priests. Woe to priests who are silent on this question. And it's not, like Archbishop Lefebvre says, it's not fashionable to condemn these liberal errors. But we have to. Oh, you're being political. Oh, you priests of the resistance, you're just all political. You're causing disunity. Well, here's Pope Leo XIII. This is the authority of the Catholic Church. Sorry. This is the way it is. And those priests who agree to be silent about these issues because they don't want to appear divisive and political, they're betraying our Lord. They actually betray our Lord because they're not working for his social reign and the reign of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Oh, you're being political. Don't be political. Well, our Lord's political. He didn't teach separation of church and state. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, render to God the things that are God's. But Caesar was also render to God what is God's, which is obey his commandments, obedience to his laws, belief in all that he has revealed. So, liberal Catholics, they don't like this. They don't like to hear this. Just stay with the Latin Mass. That's sufficient. Just Latin Mass, Latin Mass. Don't argue. Don't bring all this political stuff up. Sorry. They've reduced the Latin Mass to a bumper sticker on a car. That's what they've done. And they don't mind that, modernist Rome and the Freemasons. They don't mind these Catholics all bickering about their Latin Mass. But you promote the reign of Christ the King and the reign of the Sacred Heart of Jesus at the political level, that's serious business. And we can preach about it, they don't mind that. But the moment there's actually a movement and a political body working towards that goal, you will see murders, you will see division, you will see the action. You'll see action, terrorists. That's what they would use today, terrorists. So, I read on. In those matters with regard to religion, let it be seen how the Freemasonics act. They work for separation of church and state. By this means they reject from the laws and from the commonwealth the wholesome influence of the Catholic religion. And they consequently imagine that states ought to be constituted without any regard for the laws and precepts of the church. So, separation of church and state. No influence of the priests or nuns teaching catechism. No Catholic schools, or at least make sure the Catholic schools don't teach too much against the kingship of Christ, and so forth. And make sure they get accredited. And once they're accredited, then they have to fall in line with the government policies. That happened in Australia. One of the men was telling me that the priest who was in charge of the Maorist education, the Maorist fathers, they had wonderful schools all throughout Australia. teaching boys' schools and also the nuns with the girls' schools. And it was around the time of Vatican II, and this leader, the priest, told them, the prefect, do not get accreditation from the schools, from the government. Do not accept this. I have to be away for a month, but when I come back, I expect, you've obeyed what I've commanded. He left, and when he was gone, they signed up the accreditation of the state with the atheistic state. So he was furious when he got back and discovered they betrayed him. He was furious. And then over there, they're more aggressive than here in the U.S. And he said that eventually they were taken, no more catechism was taught. They removed crucifixes from the classrooms, holy pictures, statues, all gone because it was offensive to other religions. So whenever you hear, all the flag waving and fireworks praising separation of church and state, that's Freemasonry. So we Catholics are the true patriots of the country. We are the true patriots. We don't want these Masonic ideas that destroy society, the marriage, the family. We do want the reign of Christ the King. But we have to oppose the Masonic liberal errors, separation of church and state, freedom of conscience. These have all been condemned by all the great popes. And this is what has been buried and forgotten in America and Canada. So it's thanks to Archbishop Lefebvre, really, that we've dig out these treasures again. And we have to preach them. We have to spread this. And for the enemies, the lodges, it will mean war at some point. But Christ has ways of converting. I will reign in spite of my enemies, he said. Adjutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.